Advocacy doesn't require being the loudest in the room. It starts with relationships, participation, and sharing real experiences. When small businesses engage in policy conversations, lawmakers better understand how decisions affect employers, workers, and communities across Delaware. And ultimately, better conversations lead to better policy and a stronger future for our state. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Delaware Deep Dive, a podcast by the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce. I'm your host, Kelly Basil, and it's Small Business Month, so we are talking all things small business. With me for this episode, I have Joe Giordano, president at Whisman, Giordano & Associates, Jake Ruddy, Delaware and Maryland president of PCS, and my colleague, Evan Park, vice president of government affairs here at the Delaware State Chamber. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
All right, before we dive in, I want to give each of you the opportunity to introduce yourselves and tell the listeners about your role in your business. So I'll start with Jake.
All right. So I'm with PCS. We are an outsourced IT support partner for businesses, and I run Delaware to DC for us. So most of our clients don't have any internal IT, and we handle everything from can't print, got a virus, computer won't turn on, to cloud migrations and cybersecurity.
And fun fact, many years ago, Jake saved me when my computer broke. Joe?
Jake has saved me a few times too. So, Joe Giordano from Whisman, Giordano Associates. We're a locally owned and operated CPA firm in Newark, Delaware. We've been here for 53 years now, since 1973. Full service CPA firm, so accounting and auditing, tax services, outsourced accounting, and consulting.
Evan?
I am Evan Park, Vice President of Government Relations here at the State Chamber. My role, I consist of, I lead the government relations arm of the operation here, sort of supporting our membership and protecting and engaging with the legislature.
All right, thanks for introducing yourselves. We're just going to go right into the questions. And I will let whoever wants to answer this one first, but and I shouldn't say whoever. Evan, this is not a question for you. This is for Jake and Joe. When you took on your leadership roles at your companies, did you think much about regulation and public policy? And was there a moment or a specific issue that kind of changed things for you?
Well, for me, in the beginning, no. Honestly, I didn't pay too much attention to it. Just figured that people would make good decisions and let it do its thing. And then a couple years ago, I was at the end of session event for the Delaware State Chamber, and I heard how many bills were discussed and passed, and I kind of scratched my head and I said, we're the first state. Do we have this many bills to actually create at this point in time? And then I also kind of thought, why are we not spending more time just making 10 really, really good bills and fixing some things? We've been hearing about Ready in 6 for as long as I can remember at this point in time. I'm not even in that industry, but it's ridiculous that all this stuff we're still talking about it. Mm-hmm. And then for me, the big thing was HB 350. And, being in business, if someone came to me and said, hey, I'm going to throw a board over your business and tell you what to do, that would be unacceptable for any other business. And I'm not saying that the hospital system doesn't have its challenges, but it's more insurance companies than it is the hospital system. So I just thought that there's some things happening that I didn't really agree with, so I started to plug in a little bit more.
That's really interesting that a bill that had nothing to do with your industry was kind of that moment for you to get engaged.
Well, it's a slippery slope,
yeah.
Right? So when you start seeing stuff like that, it's like, all right, well, every roofer's going to have this new thing or whatever the industry is. You start doing that to one industry, the rest of them are going to follow quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one hit me too, Jake, and that wasn't the first one for me. I had to pay attention earlier on. I started my career as an auditor, so part of doing an audit of small business, nonprofit, whatever the case may be, is you have to be aware of what's going on in their industry. So even national bills and local, you have to know what's going on if you work in the construction industry, if you work with real estate developers. So I always kind of paid attention, but I wouldn't say I was really engaged. Probably when I was invited to join the Small Business Alliance with the State Chamber, I started to hear about things that were coming down the pike, and it was very eye-opening. The first one was paid family leave,
Mhm.
and I actually got the opportunity at a Lyman House breakfast, of all things, to sit next to, at that time,
Senator.
she was senator, so State Senator McBride, and I had a conversation with her about it's not a matter of the cost for the small business, it's the loss of revenue. Because for us, if somebody's out for 3 months from February through April, I can't make up the revenue.
Mhm.
We can build the costs into our fees, and we can do all that. And I think she took that along with some of the advocacy that the state chamber did and some other groups, and she did raise some of the parameters. So I think that was very helpful, that she was willing to engage with us as a community.
Right. Evan, I told you it wasn't a question for you, but I'm going to let you chime in.
Well, no, I thought something Jake said was important, because we have seen that rear its head in other areas. That we're seeing it now in the power with Delmarva Power and the cost cap bill that Senator Hansen's running, that would basically limit how much they could recuperate every year. And I think we're going to see that in other arenas as well. Perhaps, like say higher ed,
Right.
if they decide that tuition gets too high, they could cap that. So I think it's wise to keep an eye on that, and that would be a good reason to get involved.
Yeah.
What surprised you the most about how government decisions impact your operations?
So I'll take it first, but I think Jake and I are going through the same thing over the past, I'm going to say 2 or 3 years, maybe it's 5 at this point. A lot of the bills that are coming down over the past several years have put a much larger burden on the small business community, and not necessarily just costs, but administering some of these programs, paid family leave. I know Speaker Minor Brown has a goal of the child care cost sharing, and I know paid sick leave was on the table a few years ago. Administering these programs requires time, and for a small business owner like myself, I have clients to serve. I do not have the bandwidth to read every bill and stay on top of every piece of legislation that comes out. So that means we now have to outsource it, and that's another cost. And the smaller the business, the harder that is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing that has really hit me. And one of the things I've seen is a lot of small businesses are selling their business because they don't want to deal with this. I had one client, and Jake, I'm not sure if they were your client too, a couple years ago, who basically said, I just want to do sales. I don't want to run the business anymore. I just want to do sales. And they sold their business. So now they work for a national company.
Mm-hmm. Jake, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things going on that just, there's not one big thing. It's a whole bunch of little things that are just kind of stacking up. And we have a lot of people in Dover who have never run a business. They're good intentioned, but they don't understand the impact. And some of these things that are coming out, if you look at a small business under 100 employees or 100 maybe 50 employees, when you look at hiring and how you're going to spend your money, the only positions you want to hire are those positions that bring in revenue. That's your number one focus. So when you're 20 employees, 50 employees, 100 employees, you probably don't have an HR person.
Right.
That's just a reality. It's just, that's 80 grand or 70 grand, whatever it is, that you're just not willing to spend because you haven't got to the critical mass size of your business. When you're a bigger business, you've got the revenue to be able to afford more of those positions. So, there was an HR bill that fixed a problem I don't really think that existed. When I post a job for a technician, I post a wide range. It's like 60 to 95,000. Why? Because every single person is different, and I'm not going to track every single job post, because I can interview that person and say, all right, based on your skill set, you fit in this range, and it's easy to track. But now all of a sudden we have to track all that because of a new bill. And I think a lot of it just adds up over time, and we already have a lot to do. I mean, a business owner doesn't work 40 hours a week. They're already working 60, 80 hours a week. And now if they don't have HR to do some of these things, now they're just doing more.
And Jake said something really important that I think we should focus on a little bit. I agree with him that I think our legislators are well-intentioned. I don't think they're bad people. I think it's a lack of, I don't like education because they're educated, but not necessarily in the things that affect the small business. So I think, but that's a really good point that Jake made.
Evan, do you have any thoughts on it?
No,
I mean, you're working with legislators every day and helping to educate them on these topics.
For sure. No, I think that both what they said, the folks are very well intended, and oftentimes they're responding to an issue that was brought to them. And so while fixing or solving that one problem, don't understand pulling that lever is going to cause some unintended consequences elsewhere. And so we see legislation that, may make one segment of the business industry very, very happy while making the rest of the folks out there uncomfortable. And I think that sort of to your point about not fully understanding sort of the implications outside of that, doing everything in a vacuum. And so that's sort of our role, I guess, you guys from the business community, and my job here to help educate them or bring them up to understand, what they're actually doing.
Yeah, something you just said, Evan, made me think of our end of session policy conference that was just a few days ago. But Carrie Evelyn Harris, I think, was who said this. But she doesn't want to look at, and this is specific to tax policy, but I think it could apply to a lot of different topics, but she doesn't want to look at tax policy in silos. She thinks she wants to look at it holistically. And I think that's so smart to think about policy that way, because to your point, you don't know when you're tackling one area, how that impacts every other area. And so that's a practice that I think we all need to be better at. It's something that I think the chamber can champion too, because we do have such a diverse membership, so we can bring that 360 perspective. And so just, being proactive about sharing those thoughts, that expertise.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too deep into tax policy because being the CPA on the podcast today, but I had a legislator in my office a few years ago that did not understand the difference between someone who makes $1 million on a W-2 and someone who makes $1 million in an LLC that doesn't take $1 million. And they're taxed at the end of the day, not exactly the same, but they do go to the personal tax return. Mm. So I don't think the majority of the population that does not deal with taxes does not understand tax policy and how taxes actually work.
I don't understand tax policy.
Some of the people in our firm would say I don't either, but that's beside the point.
Okay, next question. And Evan, this is specifically for you.
I'm ready.
All right. Why is it important that policymakers hear directly from small business owners and not just large employers or industry groups?
So I think partly it goes back to the previous question, and that legislators don't need to hear from a large number of people to understand there's an issue. So engaging with them, 2 or 3 businesses have a similar concern. You got their attention now. I think that a lot of times on the defensive side, they are running legislation targeting or trying to react to something that the large companies do, to something that I've heard Joe say before. They don't recognize the impact it has on the small businesses and how that may change the industry or Delaware's business environment overall. So I think hearing from the small and local businesses is imperative to help shape the policy-making process.
Mm-hmm. And I know we say it all the time. I think it's important to say it again, but the majority of businesses in Delaware, the majority of the workforce are employed by small businesses. So to not understand the implications of that community, you're not understanding the majority of your workforce.
And if I can add to that, it's not a coincidence that the largest corporations in the country, not just the state, don't have a problem with more regulation. Mm-hmm. They have the capital to deal with those things. And when there's more regulations that are on the business community, the little guy has a hard time competing.
Right.
And, for economic growth overall, I think the small business community is a better economic driver, particularly in this state.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I've literally had business owners tell me due to recent regulation, they will never grow past 25 employees. They're like, not dealing with it.
Wow.
And,
which is
I mean,
wild.
That
to
hurts
me.
us.
It's wild to me to hear that.
Yeah, that they choose not to grow.
No.
Right. It's. I mean, I don't want to go down that path. I feel like that's dying. That's a slow death to not grow.
So, okay, we need more small business owners going to Leg Hall and just, creating those relationships with policymakers. But that can be intimidating for a lot of people. I'd say the average person hasn't been to their state house before or met with their legislator. And I think it's a lot of times because they assume advocacy is lobbying or politics in sort of the traditional sense. Sorry, I'm going to keep explaining and then I'll ask the question. I think it's more about storytelling and just sharing your experiences to help lawmakers understand like what they're actually working on. So what are some of your greatest challenges or issues that you're experiencing right now? And how do you help policymakers understand that? I'm going to give it to Jake first because I know you were just at Leg Hall with Senator Poore.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of you got to get plugged in, right? I was not sure what happened in a typical day down in Dover, so I happened to have Nicole Poore at a CEO dinner that I host, and I said, I want to get more plugged in. I want to learn more. What do I do? And she just said, pick a day, preferably a Wednesday, and shadow me for the entire day. And I literally walked all through behind the scenes, went to 5 different committee meetings with her and got to see how things work. And the reality is that they welcome that. They want to talk to you. They want to hear from you. No one wants to make a decision in a vacuum, and a lot of times they're forced to do that because they don't have input from the business community. So I would greatly encourage everyone to just contact the local rep and say, hey, can you show me what goes on in Dover? Like, can I follow you around for a day? I don't think any of them are going to say no.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll generally appreciate you going the extra mile and trying to get involved. So I would just say, get rid of the intimidation. It's not bad. I was a little nervous walking in, and within 10 minutes, I was like, all right, we're cool. This is going to be fun. We had a good day.
I would second that. Now I'm lucky that where I live, my district representative is Mike Smith. And I got to know him before he was a representative, when he worked at the Newcastle County Chamber of Commerce, and we had become friendly before he started running for office. And we can have a cup of coffee or grab lunch and just have a conversation. And, the conversation always starts with, how are your kids? How are your parents? How's the family? All of those things. And the relationship helps because Mike and I don't agree on every policy, but we have found the things that we do agree on, we can talk about those and we can kind of agree to disagree on the others. So I think building the relationship is it's critical in everything about business, but it's particularly critical with the legislators because if they know you as a person, they're more likely to take your phone call.
Right.
And signing a canned letter that, advocacy groups will say, oh, hey, you signed this petition. That's meaningless. It's not meaningless, but it doesn't have the same impact as a text or a phone call.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I wanted to just remind people that you have 2 representatives, right? You have where you live and where your business is. Mm-hmm. And you should really just, I invited someone last year to come have a coffee with me. I was just like, hey, just, come have a coffee, I'll buy you breakfast, whatever, and let's talk about some things. And actually, one of the things I talked about was the EV bill, because I have a car that has an electric motor, but it does not plug in. I was like, why do I have this tax? And she's like, hey, well, actually, we're talking about that. We made some mistakes. We're going to correct it. And she said, I think it has been corrected or will be soon. And like a month later, she sent me an email, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you got to look at it like sales, right? People like to do business with people they know, like, and trust. This is the same thing with the lawmakers, right? Like, I've got Nicole's cell number now. Mm-hmm. They're open to communication. You just have to open the door and ask them to have a conversation.
And building off that, Jake, it's not just, the representative and senator where you live, and the rep and the senator where you work, but there's also members who sit on committees that you might care about, or they're chairing some sort of commission or initiative. Those people are just as important to get to know. So you should really look beyond your districts when you're building relationships.
I would just jump in to say that I think it's critical we take advantage of the fact that we live in Delaware, where everyone is so reachable. You know, we see our U.S. or congressional delegation at, you know, the grocery store sometimes, and, you know, you're out and about with your kid's soccer game, you're going to run into your state rep perhaps. So I can understand why people may be intimidated, but to Jake's point, you should, you know, try to get over that, because these people are very, very approachable.
Right, and that's not the case in every state.
Right, exactly.
We have clients all over, just like Jake does, and you know, you go to Maryland or Pennsylvania, it's not as accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Evan, I have another question for you. So part of the state chambers, and I'm going to say this with quotes, elevator pitch, is to say that we help ensure policies and regulations are business friendly. What does that mean in practice, especially when it comes to compliance and red tape?
Well, I think, you know, Jake and Joe both touched on it earlier. As we get through some of the more regulatory red tape and as it piles on top of each other year over year, you know, sometimes as those things build up, the environment becomes less friendly. We here at the state chamber hear from our members directly how these things are impacting them on a day-to-day basis. And I'm charged with the responsibility of being the liaison to the General Assembly and our policymakers to help them understand. And in that, I would say part of that process is to have these people come to Dover, meet with the people we were talking about earlier, with their state rep, their state senator, and sort of letting them hear directly as well what the issues are and how we can better structure policy to be a bit more business friendly, to support the economy and economic development. There's a lot of layers to why we need to be a business friendly state.
Oh, great answer.
Thank you.
Evan gets nervous because he's only been with us for 6 months, but he's very good at his job.
Gold star for Evan.
Yeah, he gets a gold star.
Thank you.
Okay. Too often legislation is introduced with good intention. I feel like we've already kind of touched on that a couple times. But businesses aren't brought into the conversation until after the issue has been identified, and now amendments have become necessary. So instead of businesses reacting to bills after they've been filed, how do we encourage more proactive collaboration between employers and lawmakers during the policy development process, so stronger legislation is built from the start?
So are you asking how we as the business community, how the state chamber does, what's the, be a little specific?
Interpret as you would like.
Okay.
It's kind of open-ended, right? I think, yes, the chamber should be working on that, but we also just spoke about how a small business owner needs to take the initiative to build those relationships. So I think you could really take it from any angle.
I mean, I'll just say what I said a few minutes ago. It comes down to building relationships, and like anything else, you have to make an effort. You have to pick up the phone. You have to send an email, have a cup of coffee with somebody. That's the biggest factor, is get to know them as people so that they're willing to engage with you as well. But in order for them to engage with you, they need to know who you are. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I think it's a matter of getting plugged in more. There's a lot of different things that are available to you. Look, Small Business Day in Dover. We got the SPCA or SBA. Like, there's a lot of committees just in the state chamber that you can get involved in that'll give you a summary of what's going on. There's some political events you can go to and get updates. Like, you got to get plugged in. You make time to go network and grow your business. Well, make time to protect your business and learn about what's going on and build these relationships and share your thoughts. Like, no one's out here to destroy business. They just don't know what the impacts are. And you know, it's really tough after a law gets passed that all of a sudden someone's like, "Whoa, well, this is going to hurt me. I need to speak up." Now you got twice as much work to get done just to change it. Like, it's really on the business community to get a little bit more plugged in, and there are lots of opportunities to do that through different organizations. You just got to spend the time.
Shameless plug. We have plenty of room for active members on the Small Business Alliance at the State Chamber. As two of the members of the Alliance are sitting here on this podcast, and Evan does all the hard work and heavy lifting, more active members would be very helpful for us.
So I'm going to go back to my question a little bit, and I'm going to lead you, Joe, with an example. Last year, we were working on a bill related to pay transparency. A good intention bill, right?
Yes.
And, we had our position throughout that process, and we featured, I believe it was Melanie Roslevin that introduced it. So we hosted the bill sponsor at one of our events so that she could talk about it. Joe stands up and asks a question, which really, I think, opened Pandora's box on the bill. I mean, and I'll kind of let you finish the story there.
The unfortunate reality was that she got bad information from, I think it was the Department of Labor, but don't quote me on that, where they told her one thing and the actual regulations said something different. So when I actually read an excerpt of the regulations to her, and she went, "That's not what they told me." And she ended up going back and editing the bill because that information that she became aware of went, and it was like the light bulb, like, oh, wait a second. This doesn't make as much sense as I thought it did. So, again, being involved before the fact, like Jake said and Evan said, and if you wait until after the bill is passed, it's too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was a really important opportunity for us to be able to work a very good amendment into the bill.
Correct.
But
and unfortunately,
that even happened pretty late in the process, and so
right. And I couldn't make it this year. I had other things on my calendar, so we didn't have me to stand up and literally read from the code.
If I could, there's something that you said that kind of touched on something we talked about earlier, which is they are easy to get in touch with. They're usually there's a few bills where they're not seeking everyone's input, but
Correct.
In more cases than not, by the time the bill has been filed, they have already tried to reach out and tried to have some communications with folks. So if you are in one of the policy committees and you see an email, please respond in a timely fashion so we can communicate back to the legislators and make sure they know where we are with our feedback in the process.
The other thing I wanted to mention is I think most people struggle to read a bill.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle to read in general, but I see one of those and I'm like, holy smokes. But the good thing about being on...
That's why he has a YouTube channel.
Yeah. The good thing about being on the Small Business Alliance is that Evan will send a summary of the bill. So I don't have to spend my time reading that and dissecting it, making sure I understand it. I've got a good understanding of it, and just being part of the committee gives me that insight. So highly encouraged.
Yeah, just building off what Evan said too, I think it was a great point. I get so used to what the chamber is doing all the time that sometimes I forget to talk about what we're doing. And our policy committees are so important because, yes, you are helping a lot of different business people digest what's going on at Legislative Hall. But also, too, it's such a key touch point for us and the business community to get that feedback. And it's so huge. Like, we would not be able to provide thoughtful and constructive feedback without those participants. And so having businesses on our policy committees is vital. I'm getting the 5-minute cue, so I'm going to go to the next question. All right, one of the themes I keep coming back to is relationships. Good policy conversation usually starts long before there's an actual ask or need. Have you had experiences where building a relationship with a policy maker led to a more productive conversation? And Joe, like you said earlier, even if you don't fully agree on it, love to get examples.
Well, it's not a business policy, but Mike Smith and I text each other occasionally on a variety of topics. And so I'll say I'm a firearm owner. Boys and their toys, right? I hope I never have to pull the trigger of a gun anywhere but the gun range. But there was a bill that was coming out, and him and I gave him my point of view, and he's a little more moderate on that subject than I am, and he gave me his point of view, and we agreed to disagree, but the respect of, hey, here's what I think and here's why, I feel like that it made me feel heard, which that's all I really wanted. And I'm not too far right on firearms either. I don't think everyone should get one. I have some friends that I don't think should have them, but but it was not a business policy. On tax policy, him and I spoke, and unfortunately, he did vote against it when we decoupled from the federal tax code. I thought that was a terrible idea for long term for business. We want more people to invest in business here. We want more people to innovate here. And when you're a research and development company, you're spending a lot of money in the front end of your company when you're not making anything. So getting those deductions, building NOLs has value later on.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that taking that and bonus depreciation away was a bad idea, just from a business perspective. Not necessarily, I understand the budget gap. I understand that piece of the equation. I just thought that was a bad idea for business-friendly policy.
Yeah, I mean that one's really about longevity, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can only spend so much money before you run out of money, and if you can write it off a little sooner, it's helpful.
Right.
I mean, you're going to be able to write it off regardless.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it obviously didn't affect me, but I was surprised by it, disappointed when I saw it get passed.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I'll kind of reference is the AI chatbot bill.
Thank you.
When I spent my day in Dover, I happened to get involved in the conversation with a few people that were talking about. And Evan, you'll know the language better than I will, but there's this one small piece of it that just if you label that it's a chatbot and there's no harm done, someone can still come back and get the business. When they were talking about it, and the gentleman that was talking to the senator and a couple other people in the room said, like, this is legal 101. You learn this in the beginning, and we have this language in here that holds that business accountable even when they shouldn't be. If you change that, the bill is fine. And everyone looked at me like, well, you're the tech guy in the room. What do you think? I'm like, 100% agree with that. That makes sense. Like, just look at this logically, and yes, that's the right decision. So, being close to some of those conversations, sometimes you might have some input that, like, I wasn't expecting that conversation to happen. Just kind of happened to be in the right room at the right time. And I think a lot of that, as you go to different events and you get closer to your representatives and whatnot, they're there to hear what you've got to say. And their job is to serve us, right? So the best way they can serve us is by hearing what we have to say. And they're not, I'm not saying they're going to agree with everything that you say, but their job is to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, I mean, just look at yourself. How many times in life have you had an opinion on something, and then someone will say, well, maybe you should look at it from this perspective. And 3 days later, you're like, oh man, they were right. We're all human.
I never say that. I'm kidding, just for the record.
Evan, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I think we've talked about it a bit earlier. None of these folks, not to say none of them, but a lot of the folks aren't experts in these different spaces, especially not spaces we operate in. And again, so I think just being able to engage and have those conversations, like we've all said, and engage early if you can, obviously. And usually you'll have a good opportunity to Joe's point, at least be heard. And I think to a lot of people, most people's constituents, they know they just want to be heard. So they're here to listen. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, my last question, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, but I think it's a nice way to wrap up the episode. So hopefully this podcast has encouraged a lot of small business owners to get more engaged. What advice would you give someone who is considering becoming more involved in this space? What's like one good first step?
Pay attention, right? Like, even if you don't have time, we all have the same 24 hours, but lots of people use the excuse, I don't have time. You can spend 5 minutes and write an email, right? It's super easy. Just pay attention. I mean, it's open your eyes, join a committee that has something to do with politics so you understand what's going on with policy, and open your mouth or get your fingers typing and send an email and just share your opinion.
Engage. I think Jake kind of said it, pay attention, but engage. And, with how small of a state, it's so easy to reach out to the people that are in your district and just have a cup of coffee. They'll do it. They may not be able to do it when they're in session, when they're there, God knows how many hours, but they're going, Evan said it. You might see them at your kid's soccer game, or you might they'll have a cup of coffee with you. Get to know them as people. The overwhelming majority are good, decent people that want the same things that we all want. We all want to go to work, take care of our families, enjoy our families, and, be able to afford groceries and rent or mortgage or whatever. We all want the same thing. We all want a successful Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be my advice.
I guess I'm going to build off what Jake said earlier about going down with Senator Poor. I would often just say, come to Leg Hall and watch. You can sit and listen. I'm there. Find me. Ask me what's going on. But there's also plenty of people just walking around who are willing to point you in the right direction, make an introduction for you. So if you have no other way to get involved, just come to Dover one day.
Yeah, and to make it even a step easier, you can go to the state's website and even watch hearings.
True.
At this point. So they make it very accessible. All right, before I let everyone go, if a listener really loved or hated what you had to say, how can they get a hold of you?
I guess the best way is probably email. It's just jruddy, RUDDY, at helpmepcs.com. But if you didn't like me, it's pcshelpme.com.
There you go. And what's your YouTube channel?
So my when I'm not doing my day job of IT, I spend my weekends filming barbecue content, and it's Rum and Cook.
There you go.
I like eating barbecue, so I like when Jake invites me over. So email is always best. It is jvg@whismangiordano.com. Whether you like me or hate me, you can shoot me an email. Our office phone number is 302-266-0202. I'll be happy to talk to you.
That's very Ron from
Ron Swanson.
Yeah.
Ron Swanson. Oh yeah, that's Ron Swanson's my spirit animal.
Yeah, no, he signs every email he sends.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Evan, how can people get a hold of you?
Likewise, email, and I am epark, EPARK, @dscc.com.
Awesome. And if you have any questions, suggestions for future episode topics, or want to get in touch with me or any of my colleagues at the State Chamber, you can find our contact information at our website, dscc.com. You can also find the State Chamber on social media, Facebook, X, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. And just thanks again, everyone, for joining me. I really appreciated this conversation today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Delaware Deep Dive, brought to you by the Delaware State Chamber of Commerce. Before we sign off, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen. I know podcast hosts say this all the time, but your support is invaluable, and it helps other listeners easily find us. I'm your host, Kelly Basil. We'll see you soon.